We often hear that the path to success, especially in leadership, is paved with likability, that being well-liked ensures loyalty, fosters cooperation, and ultimately guarantees power. But what if this widely accepted notion is a dangerous myth? What if the pursuit of popularity, in certain contexts, is a recipe for weakness and ultimately failure? This is the very question Niccolò Machiavelli, the infamous Renaissance political philosopher, grapples with in his seminal work, The Prince. Far from advocating for a benevolent, universally loved ruler, Machiavelli offers a starkly contrasting perspective, one rooted in the brutal realities of power. He challenges the romanticized ideal of the beloved leader, exposing the inherent vulnerabilities of a regime built on affection alone. His analysis, often provocative and undeniably unsettling, forces us to confront a fundamental truth about the acquisition and maintenance of power. It is not always, and perhaps not even usually, achieved through charm and popularity. This exploration of Machiavelli's philosophy will delve into the complex relationship between fear, power, and the often uncomfortable realities of leadership, ultimately leading us to a deeper understanding of his enduring and often controversial legacy. Prepare to challenge your assumptions about what constitutes effective governance. The journey begins now. To understand Machiavelli's argument, we must first understand the context in which The Prince was written. Penned in the early 16th century, during a period of intense political instability in Italy, the work wasn't a theoretical treatise, but a practical guide for aspiring rulers navigating a treacherous landscape. Forget idealistic notions of benevolent leadership. Machiavelli's focus was squarely on the acquisition and, more importantly, the retention of power. This is where the concept of realpolitik becomes crucial. Realpolitik, in its essence, is a political philosophy that prioritizes practical considerations over moral or ideological ones. For Machiavelli, the ends, maintaining power, justified the means, regardless of whether those means are conventionally considered ethical or acceptable. He observed the brutal realities of his time, witnessing the rise and fall of ambitious princes, and concluded that success in the political arena was not determined by virtue, but by a cold, calculated understanding of human nature and the effective use of power. His definition of successful leader, therefore, wasn't one who inspired love or admiration, but one who skillfully navigated the complex game of power, securing their position and maintaining control, even if it meant employing methods that might be considered morally reprehensible. This pragmatic, even cynical, approach forms the bedrock of Machiavelli's argument, a perspective that continues to provoke debate and analysis centuries later. The Prince, therefore, is not a manual for tyranny, but rather a dispassionate analysis of how power operates in the real world. At the heart of Machiavelli's argument lies a fundamental dichotomy: fear versus love. While many might believe that a ruler should strive to be loved by their subjects, Machiavelli contends that this is a precarious foundation upon which to build a lasting regime. Love, he argues, is fickle and unreliable. It is easily swayed by circumstance, by personal whims, and by the actions of others. Loyalty born of love is therefore inherently unstable. A ruler who relies solely on the affection of their people risks losing their power the moment that affection wanes. This instability, Machiavelli asserts, is a fatal flaw for any leader. Fear, on the other hand, offers a far more predictable and reliable basis of control. The fear of punishment, the fear of reprisal, these are powerful motivators that can ensure obedience and compliance, even in the absence of genuine affection. This is not to say that Machiavelli advocates for tyrannical rule based solely on terror. Rather, he suggests that a judicious blend of fear and respect is the optimal strategy for maintaining power. The fear must be carefully calibrated, avoiding the extremes of cruelty and oppression, while fostering a sense of awe and respect for the ruler's authority. It is a delicate balance, one that requires a keen understanding of human psychology and a ruthless pragmatism in wielding power. This careful management of fear, he suggests, provides a more stable and secure foundation for a lasting regime than the unreliable and often fleeting affections of the populace. The key, for Machiavelli, lies in understanding the limits and potentials of both fear and love in the context of political power. Machiavelli's critique of relying solely on love for political stability is not merely a philosophical abstraction. It's grounded in a keen observation of human behavior and historical precedent. Consider the fragility of popular support in times of crisis. A ruler adored in times of peace and prosperity might find themselves abandoned and even reviled when faced with hardship, war, or economic downturn. The fickle nature of public opinion, swayed by rumor, fear, and self-interest, renders love an unreliable foundation for power. Imagine a benevolent king, beloved by his people, suddenly confronted with a devastating famine. The initial loyalty, born of affection and admiration, could quickly evaporate as hunger and desperation drive the populace to seek a leader who can alleviate their suffering regardless of their past affection for the current ruler. Similarly, a leader celebrated for their generosity and compassion might find that very generosity exploited and their compassion perceived as weakness when faced with internal rebellion or external aggression. History provides countless examples of once popular leaders overthrown by those who, despite lacking the same charm or charisma, were perceived as more capable of protecting the people's interests or at least their survival during a time of crisis. This instability inherent in love-based governance is precisely what Machiavelli sought to avoid. His emphasis on a reliable, if less palatable, nature fear stems from a realistic assessment of human nature and the unpredictable ebb and flow of popular sentiment, highlighting the inherent need for a more robust, less emotionally dependent approach to securing and maintaining power. The understanding of this volatility is key to grasping Machiavelli's central argument. Machiavelli doesn't advocate for arbitrary cruelty. Rather, he champions the strategic use of fear as a tool for establishing order and predictability within a state. This predictability, paradoxically, can foster a sense of security, even amidst a system where the potential for punishment is ever present. The key lies in consistency. A ruler who enforces justice fairly, albeit harshly, creates a system where the consequences of transgression are clearly defined and consistently applied. This known system, while potentially unpleasant, offers a crucial advantage. It fosters stability. Citizens, knowing the repercussions of their actions, are less likely to engage in disruptive or rebellious behavior. This deterrent effect is far more potent than the unpredictable whims of a ruler whose actions are governed solely by fleeting emotions or popular opinion. A consistent, if severe, system of justice creates a sense of order and predictability that, in turn, fosters a climate of stability. This is not about fostering terror, but about establishing clear boundaries and ensuring that those boundaries are respected. It is about managing expectations and ensuring that the consequences of disobedience are understood, thus reducing the likelihood of unrest and maintaining the overall stability of the state. This calculated approach to the use of fear, therefore, is not about arbitrary violence, but about the strategic deployment of power to create a predictable and, in its own way, secure environment. The very predictability of the system, however harsh, can ultimately contribute to a sense of stability and order. It's crucial to understand that Machiavelli's endorsement of fear as a tool for maintaining power is not a blanket justification for tyranny. He distinguishes sharply between the fear that inspires respect and the fear that breeds hatred. The former is a calculated instrument of governance, the latter a recipe for rebellion, and ultimately, the downfall of the ruler. The difference lies not simply in the severity of the punishment, but in its application. A ruler who is perceived as competent, just, and even-handed, even when administering harsh penalties, is far more likely to inspire a grudging respect than one whose actions are arbitrary, capricious, or motivated by personal vendettas. The key lies in the perception of fairness. A ruler who punishes equally, regardless of social standing or personal connections, establishes a sense of order and predictability that, while potentially feared, is also respected. This is in stark contrast to a ruler whose punishments are erratic, unpredictable, and perceived as unjust. Such a ruler may inspire fear, but will be a fear born of hatred and resentment, ultimately undermining their authority and fostering conditions ripe for revolt. Machiavelli's argument hinges on the notion that a ruler who is perceived as competent and fair, even in the administration of justice, is far more likely to maintain control than one whose reign is characterized by arbitrary cruelty and unpredictable acts of violence. The subtle distinction between fear that commands respect and fear that breeds hatred is fundamental to understanding Machiavelli's nuanced perspective on the role of fear in maintaining political power. Machiavelli's concept of fear as a tool for governance is inextricably linked to the ruler's competence. Fear, in his view, is not merely a blunt instrument of oppression. It is a consequence of a ruler's demonstrated ability to maintain order and protect the state. A weak, indecisive ruler, however benevolent their intentions, will inspire not fear, but contempt. This contempt will inevitably erode their authority, leaving them vulnerable to challenges from within and without. Conversely, a ruler who demonstrates competence, who acts decisively, who makes difficult choices, who effectively manages resources and defends the state, will naturally inspire a certain level of fear, not because they are cruel, but because they are powerful. This fear, however, is not born of arbitrary oppression. It is a respect for strength, for decisiveness, for the ability to maintain order in a chaotic world. It is a fear of a powerful entity capable of swift and effective action, an entity that will not hesitate to punish those who challenge its authority. This is not simply about brute force. It is about competence. A ruler who consistently demonstrates their ability to navigate political complexities, to outmaneuver rivals, and to protect their people will command respect, even if that respect is tinged with a certain amount of fear. The crucial element here is a perception of strength and effectiveness. Weakness, on the other hand, is a far greater threat to a ruler's power than any amount of perceived cruelty. It is a foundation of contempt, not fear, and contempt is the death knell of any regime. The effective use of fear as a tool for maintaining power hinges on a crucial distinction: the difference between calculated punishment and arbitrary cruelty. Machiavelli understood that while a degree of fear is necessary to maintain order, the indiscriminate use of violence or the arbitrary targeting of individuals will inevitably breed resentment and hatred, ultimately undermining the ruler's authority. The key lies in perception of justice. Punishments must be seen as fair, even if they are severe. They must be applied consistently without favoritism or bias, and they must be clearly linked to specific transgressions. Attacks on the property or honor of subjects without just cause are particularly dangerous, as they erode trust and foster widespread discontent. Such actions are not only morally reprehensible, but also strategically unwise. A ruler who is perceived as unjust, regardless of their power, will find their reign constantly challenged by rebellion and intrigue. The goal is not to inspire terror, but to establish a system where the consequences of wrongdoing are clear and predictable, thus deterring future transgressions. This requires a careful balance, maintaining sufficient authority to inspire respect and deter rebellion, while avoiding actions that will incite hatred and ultimately lead to the ruler's downfall. The foundation of this balance rests upon a perceived fairness and consistency of justice, not on the arbitrary exercise of power. The line between effective fear and destructive tyranny is a fine one, and the ruler who fails to navigate it successfully will find their reign short and ultimately unsuccessful. Let's not shy away from the stark reality. Machiavelli's approach is undeniably ruthless. He advocates for actions that, by modern ethical standards, would be considered morally reprehensible. He doesn't flinch from the implications of his recommendations. He acknowledges the potential for cruelty and oppression inherent in his system. However, his justification is rooted in a stark pragmatism. He argues that the ultimate goal, maintaining the stability and security of the state, justifies the means, even if those means involve the strategic use of fear. For Machiavelli, the chaos and instability that result from a weak or ineffective ruler are far more damaging than any suffering inflicted by a strong, albeit sometimes harsh, leader. In his view, the potential for widespread suffering and devastation under a chaotic regime outweighs the suffering inflicted by a ruler who uses calculated fear to maintain order. This is not a celebration of cruelty, but a cold-blooded assessment of the realities of power. He prioritizes the long-term well-being of the state over individual moral considerations. It's a consequentialist approach, where the ultimate justification for any action is its contribution to the overall stability and survival of the political entity. This pragmatic perspective, though morally challenging, forms the core of Machiavelli's argument and remains a point of intense debate even centuries later. The question of whether the ends justify the means in the realm of political power remains a central theme in political philosophy, a direct legacy of Machiavelli's uncompromising realism. To fully grasp Machiavelli's justification, we must consider the turbulent political landscape of Renaissance Italy. It was a world characterized by constant warfare, shifting alliances, and treacherous betrayals. Stability was a rare commodity, and the survival of any state depended on the strength and decisiveness of its ruler. In such an environment, the luxury of moral idealism was a dangerous indulgence. A ruler who hesitated, who prioritized moral considerations over strategic advantage, was likely to be swiftly overthrown. Machiavelli's pragmatic approach was a direct response to this volatile reality. He argued that a ruler must be willing to make difficult choices, even if those choices are morally uncomfortable, to ensure the survival and well-being of their state. This doesn't imply a celebration of cruelty, but rather a recognition of the harsh realities of power. The ruler, in Machiavelli's view, is not a moral exemplar, but a strategic actor whose primary responsibility is the preservation of the state. Therefore, actions that might be considered morally reprehensible in other contexts are entirely justifiable if they serve the greater good of maintaining stability and order. This is not a simple equation, and it necessitates a ruler who possesses a profound understanding of human nature, both its strengths and its weaknesses, and the ability to use that knowledge to secure their position and ensure the prosperity of their realm. It is a pragmatic calculus, coldly calculating the risks and rewards of different courses of action, always prioritizing the survival of the state above all else. This is the core of Machiavelli's political philosophy, a legacy born from the brutal realities of his time. At the heart of Machiavelli's political philosophy lies a pragmatic assessment of power dynamics. He doesn't advocate for cruelty for its own sake. Rather, he proposes a strategic use of fear as a tool for achieving and maintaining political control within a complex and often hostile environment. His argument rests on the understanding that while love might be a desirable attribute in a ruler, it is an unreliable foundation for lasting power. Popular support, driven by emotion, is fickle and easily swayed by circumstances. Fear, however, if carefully cultivated, can provide a more stable base for governance. This fear is not born of arbitrary violence or capricious cruelty. It stems from the ruler's demonstrated competence, their ability to maintain order, and their willingness to swiftly and decisively punish those who challenge their authority. The key, Machiavelli emphasizes repeatedly, lies in the distinction between fear and hatred. While a degree of fear is necessary to maintain control, the ruler must avoid actions that incite widespread hatred and resentment. This requires a calculated approach to justice, where punishments are consistently applied, are seen as fair, and are clearly linked to specific transgressions. Unjust actions, arbitrary punishments, and attacks on the property or honor of subjects will inevitably breed hatred, undermining the ruler's authority and paving the way for rebellion. Machiavelli's argument, therefore, is not a simple endorsement of tyranny, but complex calculation of the most effective means of ensuring stability and maintaining power in a world where the survival of the state depends on the strength and decisiveness of its leader. It is a ruthless, yet undeniably insightful, analysis of political power, its acquisition and its preservation. Consider the contrasting reigns of two hypothetical rulers. Ruler A relies solely on the fickle affection of the populace, showering them with gifts and promises. Initially popular, Ruler A's reign falters during a time of crisis. Unable to enforce difficult decisions, their popularity plummets, and they are swiftly overthrown. Ruler B, informed by Machiavellian principles, cultivates a calculated degree of fear, ensuring consistent, if sometimes harsh, justice. While not beloved, Ruler B commands respect and maintains order even during times of adversity. Their reign, though perhaps less outwardly pleasant, proves far more stable and enduring. This stark contrast illustrates Machiavelli's central argument. While popular love may be a desirable goal, it is an unreliable foundation for long-term power. Conversely, the strategic use of fear, when balanced with perception of justice, can provide a more secure and lasting basis for rule. Historically, we can observe similar patterns. The Roman emperors who relied solely on brute force and terror often met violent ends, their reigns marked by instability and rebellion. Conversely, those who combined strength with a degree of fairness, inspiring both respect and a degree of fear, generally enjoyed longer and more secure periods of power. These examples, both hypothetical and historical, highlight the importance of strategic calculation in the acquisition and maintenance of power. Machiavelli's insights, though morally complex, offer a valuable framework for understanding the dynamics of political leadership and the enduring tension between pursuit of power and the demands of morality. The effectiveness of any approach ultimately depends on its ability to achieve and maintain stability, a central concern for Machiavelli's analysis. Machiavelli's ideas continue to resonate in modern political discourse, albeit often in highly contested and frequently misrepresented forms. His emphasis on pragmatism and the strategic use of power is frequently cited, sometimes to justify morally questionable actions. However, it's crucial to recognize the crucial distinction Machiavelli makes between calculated fear and arbitrary cruelty. The mere invocation of realpolitik often obscures this crucial nuance, leading to a simplification and distortion of his complex argument. Modern interpretations often overlook the inherent tension in Machiavelli's work, the tension between the pragmatic pursuit of political stability and the ethical considerations that should guide a ruler's actions. While some might selectively embrace Machiavelli's pragmatism to justify morally ambiguous actions, his work also serves as a cautionary tale about the potential dangers of unchecked power and the importance of balancing strategic considerations with ethical principles. The ethical implications of Machiavelli's approach are far from straightforward. His ideas, when stripped of their context and nuance, can be easily misused to justify authoritarianism and oppression. A true understanding of Machiavelli requires careful consideration of his historical context and a nuanced interpretation of his complex and often contradictory arguments. Ignoring the ethical dimension of his work risks legitimizing actions that undermine democratic values and human rights. The enduring relevance of Machiavelli lies not in a simplistic endorsement of ruthlessness, but in his insightful analysis of the challenges inherent in the acquisition and maintenance of political power, a challenge that continues to resonate in the modern world. In conclusion, Machiavelli's argument for the strategic use of fear as a tool for maintaining power remains a provocative and enduring contribution to political thought. His assertion that a ruler's success hinges not on likability, but on a shrewd understanding and calculated application of power, challenges conventional notions of leadership. While his emphasis on pragmatism and the potential necessity of morally ambiguous actions has been frequently misconstrued, his core insight, the unreliable nature of popular affection as a foundation for political stability, retains its relevance. The volatile political landscape of the Renaissance, which shaped Machiavelli's thinking, finds echoes in the complexities of modern geopolitics. Effective leadership in any era requires a keen understanding of human nature, a capacity for strategic decision-making, and an ability to maintain order and stability. While the balance between fear and respect, between pragmatic action and ethical considerations, remains a constant challenge for any leader, Machiavelli's work provides a framework for understanding the dynamics of power and the often difficult choices that leaders must make. His insights, though controversial and potentially morally challenging, force us to confront the enduring realities of political power and the complex relationship between leadership, stability, and the strategic use of fear. The enduring power of Machiavelli's analysis lies not in a simple endorsement of authoritarianism, but in his unflinching examination of the realities of power and the complexities of effective governance. His legacy is a reminder that effective leadership demands a pragmatic awareness of the tools available to maintain order and ensure the survival of the state, even in the face of difficult moral dilemmas. Niccolò Machiavelli's legacy is one of enduring complexity. His work, often reduced to a simplistic endorsement of ruthlessness, presents a far more nuanced perspective on the acquisition and maintenance of power. The enduring relevance of the prince stems from its unflinching examination of the pragmatic realities of leadership, a reality often at odds with idealistic notions of morality. Machiavelli forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that effective governance often requires difficult choices that may necessitate actions deemed morally questionable by conventional standards. This pragmatic approach, however, is not without its inherent tensions. The strategic use of fear, while potentially effective in maintaining order and stability, carries the risk of fostering resentment, rebellion, and ultimately, the very instability it seeks to prevent. The delicate balance between the calculated use of fear and the cultivation of respect, between pragmatic necessity and ethical considerations, remains a central challenge for leaders in all eras. Machiavelli's enduring contribution lies not in providing easy answers, but in illuminating the inherent complexities of political power and the ethical dilemmas inherent in its pursuit. His work serves as a constant reminder that the acquisition and maintenance of power are not merely technical exercises, but deeply moral and profoundly human endeavors, fraught with ethical complexities and demanding a constant balancing act between competing imperatives. The enduring legacy of Machiavelli is not a simple endorsement of tyranny, but call for a deeper and more nuanced understanding of the intricate relationship between power, fear, and the ethical responsibilities of leadership. His insights, though often controversial, remain essential to understanding the enduring challenges of governance and the enduring tension between pragmatism and morality in the pursuit of political power.